Welcome to today's presentation, Effective Deployment of Multiple Law Firm Websites. My name is Dan Jaffe, and I see a pretty healthy mix of Lawlytics members and non-members. So for those of you who don't know me, here is a brief bio of me. I have been an attorney since 1998, built practices in Washington State and in Arizona. And I've been in technology full-time for about the last 7 years or so. I co-founded Lawlytics about 5.5 years ago. For those of you who don't know what Lawlytics is the leading website marketing system for owners of small law firms that helps them predictably grow their businesses without wasting time or money. We make the distinction between us and a couple different types of other providers. So unlike overpriced marketing companies, we provide lawyers with everything they need to thrive online, and we protect them from spending money on things they don't need, so our members get fair value without ever overpaying. Unlike low-end software solutions, our innovative award-winning system was built exclusively for lawyers from the ground up, and it requires no tech experience, so our members don't struggle or miss opportunities. With that, let's get into this session. So who is this session for? Well, you'll get something out of this if you are a Lawlytics member considering having multiple websites, especially if you only have one right now. You'll get something out of this if you're a prospective Lawlytics member who we've been talking to over the last few months, who's thinking about maybe starting with more than one Lawlytics website or thinking that they might want to expand and have more than one in the future. And regardless of what vendor you use, whether you're with us or anybody else or any other platform, if you're an attorney who has, or if you're thinking about having multiple law firm websites, you'll get something out of this as well. Now, if you attended our presentation a couple months ago about niche law firm websites, there's going to be a lot of redundant information that was presented in that presentation as well. There will be some unique information in addition to that, but I just want to prepare you that a lot of it translates over. So what are the goals of this session? The goals are for you to walk away being able to recognize when multiple law firm websites are right for you and avoid them when they're not. And understand when to either deploy multiple sites or if you have multiple sites to think about consolidating them. And then finally, at the end of this presentation, we're going to explain how the Lawlytics system itself handles multiple law firm websites, and we'll give you a quick demo of the Lawlytics system in action. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available within the next week or so, as will the slides, so no need to take notes. We have a lot of people in attendance, and therefore it's impossible to open it up to audio. However, we do have a question and answer session planned for the end. And the way that works is once we get done with everything, and I imagine that this presentation will take roughly 30 minutes or so, then we'll open it up for questions. There's two ways that you can add questions. You can either put them in the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel or send it to us in the chat area. We will not be able to look at or answer the questions until the end. So if you have things that you're waiting for and you need to drop off, we'll still get to those, and you can always listen to them on the recording. If you have any kind of technical difficulty, the best way to alert us to that is to raise your hand in the GoToWebinar control panel. So in terms of thinking about having multiple law firm websites, we start with the premise that you really need to have at least one firm website that's your firm's mothership, so to speak. If you don't have that, you're really spread too thin already. And so this diagram, which you'll recognize if you attended the niche law firm website presentation, is just kind of an idea of different types of websites that you and your law firm may consider as you're thinking about having more than one website. But the reason why the firm's primary site in the middle is so large is that we can't overemphasize how important it is to have an anchor site, a site that really everything else flows around. And we'll get into a little bit more of the theory of why we think this is the case in a little bit. So are you a candidate for having more than one law firm website. And you'll notice this pyramid, we use this for various things. Today, the foundation of the pyramid is before you consider having more than one site, the one site that you have needs to be sufficient. And sufficient is really kind of a table stakes word here. Really, I believe that site needs to be exceptional, not just sufficient. But there's no reason to think about having more if you haven't done what you already have going well to start out with. And we'll get into a little bit more about what that means in a moment. Um, Now, the next part of this is in order to add another law firm website, it's really important to have something else to say. Because if you don't have something else to communicate, then or a different audience to communicate to, for that matter, then you're building secondary websites for the wrong reason, and that never turns out well. And finally, you need to have the means to say it. And by the means to say it, I mean you need to have the bandwidth to create content. And by content, I mean written words on your website, as well as other ways of communicating, such as videos, but written words are the primary way. And we've talked extensively about the importance of content in a lot of our other webinars. And if you go to lawlytics.com/webinars, there's probably 30 hours or so of on-demand webinars that you can watch. Many of them have to do with not only the theory of content and how to plan it strategically, but how to create it for various types of pages on your website, when to do it, and so forth. So in order to have more than one website and make it worth your while, you need to have the bandwidth to basically say the things that your secondary websites need to say. And for that, you need either the time and the motivation to write it yourself, or you need to be able to have somebody lined up to write it for you. We don't encourage the expansion into multiple sites unless you do have that. And really what we like to do is, when we're talking about advising our members, really look at what's happened on the primary website and whether resources are actually better deployed to other websites or not, before they divert their attention and kind of dilute their efforts, if you will. Now, here's some good reasons to have multiple websites. So if your practice area is not compatible with other practice areas that you have, let's say, for example, you practice business formation and you practice sex crimes defense. Well, your business clients are probably not going to want to see the information about the sex crime defense, and it may actually have a repelling effect on them. It also, when you have too many areas of practice, even if they're not necessarily incompatible in terms of the clientele that you might want to attract, it can dilute your focus in your clients' potential clients' eyes, and therefore make them less confident that you're the right person to handle their particular case. Let's say you have multiple practice areas and they're not necessarily incompatible, but one is huge. And we see this a lot with criminal defense lawyers who take a number of different types of cases, but who really want to focus on a particular type of case, let's say DUI. And so it ends up being that 95% of their website is devoted to DUI, whereas they just as happily take other types of criminal defense cases, which are given very sparse treatment in their website. And this can end up also having the effect of impressing upon potential clients that you really specialize in one area of practice when you really don't, or don't necessarily want to. And then another good reason to have separate websites is if your area of practice, or an area of practice that you're going to be touching on, is transitory. So for example, let's say you do multi-district litigation, products liability, that type of thing. And there's a new case that's come along, but it has a shelf life. And you don't necessarily want to devote a lot of the goodwill of your main website to focusing on that area. You want to be able to have something that focuses specifically on it, not only to show your potential clients that you're the one for them to contact as far as that particular area goes, but also for ease of them being able to find you through the search engines and for ease of sharing in social media. Now, another good reason to have multiple websites is if you practice across multiple jurisdictions where the laws are different. So let's say you practice divorce law and you practice in California, Arizona, Nevada, and Oregon, so bordering states. And the reality is that the law is different and it should be explained differently in each of those states. And the clientele is different. And so if you have all of that great information, if you're following the Lawlytics method and you're providing them with detailed answers to all the questions that they have, which is the best way to do SEO in this day and age, then there's going to be too much information on your website, and it's going to be too confusing for a potential client in any of those individual jurisdictions. And so that's a good reason to have multiple sites, to just make it clean and keep that separation. And then if the expectation is local, you should think about it as well. And I differentiate the law being different from the expectation of location for a couple different reasons. They could also coincide, but you could have a practice that is the same across multiple jurisdictions, and you might practice across multiple jurisdictions. However, the clients that are going to find you are going to want to hire somebody more local. So in other words, they're not going to want to cross a bunch of state lines, even if the effect is exactly the same in most cases, unless you offer some additional perception of value that shows them that you have a big differentiator from local attorneys. Um, in order to make multiple websites work, if you have attorney buy-in in your firm, let's say you're a firm of 10 people, and you want to motivate your associates to participate. Well, an associate participating in your firm's mothership, that mothership website, I should say, that they don't own, that they don't have any stake in, that they may end up leaving, or you may let them go, and they've basically helped you build your marketing assets. Well, a savvy associate, especially somebody who is a digital native at this point, may understand that, well, that's maybe not in their best interest. However, if you really want to invest in both your business and in cultivating that associate's business as well, then a good reason may be to have a separate website or blog for that associate to motivate them to be able to write something that's not only going to help you build your practice while they're with you, and obviously you benefit directly from that, but also will help them build their reach and reputation. And especially if it's something you tell them, hey, you can take this with you when you go, as long as you give me X number of years of service, that type of thing. So it can be a good win-win situation. And then let's say you have a firm of 20, 25 lawyers, different practice areas, different departments. Some departments may be more motivated to create content and have their own website than others. Some may be the type of practice that warrants that. So, for example, a personal injury practice within a larger firm may need to go out and actually cultivate business more than a corporate practice within that same firm. And so it may make sense to have a separate website for the individual departments that feel like marketing would be a benefit to them, so that they're not dominating the firm's main site to the detriment of some of the other practice areas that don't necessarily need to advertise as heavily. Oops. So here are some reasons that are not good for having multiple law firm websites. And unfortunately, with so much misinformation out there about what SEO is and how it works, most of the attorneys that we talk with that originally think that they want to have or need multiple law firm websites do it for SEO. And it's usually because some webmaster, either recently or sometime in the past, told them that, well, if you have multiple websites, you can link them together. Not a good idea. It's a recipe for everything that you own online to blow up in the eyes of Google. And really that falls under the general umbrella of it's never a good idea to have more than one website if the sole motivation is to, or if any of the motivation is to game Google's results. We see attorneys wanting more just because more seems better, because a competitor is doing it, because somebody called them and said, well, you really need to have multiple websites, or just the spaghetti theory where, well, let's just try as much as we can, throw it at the wall and see what happens. Maybe one website will be successful, another won't, that type of thing. Not a good idea, typically, especially if you're doing multiple websites that are, very similar, but are just there for diversification. If you're trying to diversify, it's better to try different things, and there's a lot of different ways that you can go about that beyond the scope of this particular webinar, but it's more for the sake of more is usually not a good idea when it comes to online. And then diversification as a general reason to want to have multiple law firm websites. If you're following Google's guidelines, there's really no risk that your website is going to get harmed by something that has been done. And so there isn't as much of a need for you to hedge your portfolio, if you will, against something bad happening. It's only when you are either following bad SEO practices, or you've hired a marketing company that does SEO and does things like link building and trying to get backlinks and guest blog posts and stuff like that in a dishonest way, that you're at risk and would need to hedge. So we've talked a lot about reasons why you might want to expand or not expand in that case and have multiple law firm websites. But what if you're already there? What if you went down that road with a vendor who launched you with 5 or 6 or even 10 websites, saying it was a good idea, made a bunch of fanfare out of it, and then you've seen very little happen. So since then, or maybe it worked at the start and now it's not working anymore. Well, when is the time to consolidate, and what are the reasons for it? We'll get to the time in just a moment. If your websites are dividing your attention, meaning that you don't have enough resources to make any of them great while maintaining all of them, that's a sign that you probably ought to consider consolidating. If Google's attention is split between multiple sites, that's also a great reason. And what I mean by that is if you have sites that really serve the same demographic, talk about the same information, convey the same information, maybe even in the same wording, you're not doing yourself any favors by kind of spreading your cards over a wider area. Because by trying to make them all viable, the end result will likely be that none of them become great. And then finally, if it's confusing to your clients, so we see a lot of scenarios where lawyers have 5 or 6 different websites. They all do about the same thing. They put links to all the websites in their email signatures, on their printed material and so forth, and it's bad form because it doesn't give your clients a clear message about where to go, about what information to consume, and a lot of times if faced with the choice of doing one of multiple things rather than just doing one thing or a couple things, the potential clients will do nothing at all, as will the clients. So if you have a while ago bought into the idea that it's better to have a separate blog on a different domain or on a subdomain from your law firm's main website, then it might be time to consolidate. Separate blogs are almost always now less efficient than having a blog that is actually built into your law firm's website. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The biggest one is, well, there's really two, but the biggest that attorneys usually care about is SEO, and it's really a dilution of your potential clients and other followers' attention. And most of the time, separate blogs don't do a good job at selling you and your services. They may convey great information about things that you're interested in, but they don't convert clients as well as when they are part of your firm's overall website. And then finally, if you have bought into multiple law firm websites, and you're kind of shy about consolidating them right now because the vendor that you have has told you that there's an SEO benefit to having them because they're propping each other up, that type of thing. That's almost always across the board, and I say almost always instead of always, because I'm a lawyer and I want to hedge that just a little bit. But I've never seen a case where that has actually been true. And by consolidating the firm, when all the other conditions precedent to consolidating are there, that a firm has not benefited from consolidating them. Um, and one of the main arguments for having multiple websites from a lot of attorneys that have had them in the past that are now maybe thinking about consolidating them is that they wanted to cover maybe more than one of the top 10 listings in Google for various searches. And oftentimes this is just based on targeting very high level searches. So divorce lawyer Seattle, DUI attorney or DWI attorney New York or whatever. And it doesn't really provide that much of a benefit, because if you have one listing in the top 10 and that listing is good and the site is actually geared to convert the visitor into a contact of your firm, then it's done its job, and you don't need to keep shouting at them over and over again. But also, it's getting harder and harder to take up multiple spots. The better approach, which is much more consistent with what Google's doing, and this is what we recommend, is to focus more on a diversity of search terms rather than trying to cover more of the top 10 results for high level terms. So the deeper you can go in answering potential clients' questions, and the way that they search is going to be by typing in or dictating into their phone more of a natural language query that roughly mimics questions that they would ask you when they're sitting across the desk from you. You're going to be much better off. One, you're not competing head to head with most of the lawyers who are still so blind that they're going with these marketers that are pushing the old school theory of SEO. But you're also going to be able to, by doing that, connect with intelligent clients that are actually conducting in-depth intelligent searches that are frankly, they're more qualified to be clients sooner. Some myths about multiple websites, and we get the question on the left-hand side a lot first. Well, isn't it bad to have multiple sites on a single server? That's a complete myth. It doesn't really matter, because most of the websites that are out there now are not really on a single server anyways. They're in the cloud. It's really the way that the sites are used. So you could have 100 different sites on the same server, and if they were all good sites, if they all conveyed valuable information, and if they didn't do things foolishly like try to link them all to each other in order to game the search engines, then there's really no risk of having them all on a single host or server. There's also a myth that certain common elements hurt, and oftentimes this is referred to as the duplicate content penalty. Now, don't get me wrong, you don't want to just go and copy a substantive page and put it onto another website verbatim. You don't even want to just alter it slightly and do that. That really is bad. It's bad both for user experience and it's bad for the search engines. What I'm talking about are common elements that really don't change across multiple properties. Common elements like recommendations of your firm, attorney bios, office location descriptions, case results, things like that. And then the other common myth that we hear about multiple law firm websites is that they help SEO, and certainly there are ways to make multiple websites work in terms of SEO, but it's not going to boost SEO on your firm's main site just by having another site. And in fact, there are a lot of danger signals that you need to look out for, and we have protection for those built right into Lawlytics. So things to avoid, and this is really a continuation of the last point. You don't want to cross-link your sites. If you've got a multiple law firm websites, don't try to link one to the other in order to game the search engines. Google will spot that. They will dock you for it. You don't want to have a jarring user experience. So one of the things that we've noticed a lot of firms have done with other vendors is when they have multiple law firm websites, they not only link them together, but sometimes they link them together using a common primary menu. And so, for example, you go to site A and you've got this drop-down menu and it talks about different practice areas, and you click on one practice area and it takes you to a totally different site. It's not only jarring sometimes because the site itself changes, but oftentimes the look and feel of it changes and so forth too. And from a potential client's perspective, somebody that doesn't know how your sites are set up, they don't know what your motivation for doing it is. It's a jarring experience, and you want, once you get a visitor to your website, you typically want them to be able to do what they came there to do, and more importantly, what you intend for them to do, assuming that they're a qualified potential client. So certain areas of content you should never duplicate. Never duplicate substantive content, blog posts, but it is okay to duplicate the firm details if done intelligently, and I'll show you what that means in just a moment when we get to the demonstration. And don't spread yourself too thin. If you can't add content regularly or you haven't empowered somebody else to do that for you, you shouldn't be biting off additional sites, because additional sites does mean additional work. So when should you either launch a site or consolidate it, and then also avoid it altogether? If you're going to be launching multiple law firm websites, we recommend that you stagger the launch of those in time. It can, if you have a lot of content and you've got a plan, it can even be a matter of days or weeks when you launch. But most often, it's a better idea to get established with one site, get into a rhythm, and then say, okay, I've got enough time now, or I've got enough content that's built up outside of my other website that I think it's time to launch another website. And when you do so, only do it at a time where you're committed to keeping it up in terms of the content, or you've empowered somebody to do so. When are good times to consolidate multiple websites? Well, it's a no-brainer when changing services that you might want to look at that. We regularly bring people in from other large legal marketing vendors where they have 5, 7, even 10 sites. And we look at all the sites and we say, okay, well, not only are we going to save you, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per site, but we can consolidate these sites into 1, 2, or 3, whatever strategy dictates, and save you even more money, and also amplify your message in doing so. So when changing services, it's always a good opportunity to look at that. If you have other sites that are just sitting there and haven't been touched, it might be time to think about it. And if you have sites out there that are redundant of each other, you might look at that as a reason why none of your sites are doing particularly well, if that's the case. Avoid multiple sites if you don't have a clearly articulable reason to add another one. And before you add multiple sites, it's really good to make sure that you have a clear picture of what your medium and long-term goals are. And I say medium and long-term because it's oftentimes a knee-jerk reaction to the phone not ringing, or thinking about maybe adding a new area of practice to say, oh, okay, well today I woke up and criminal defense and divorce are going well, but I just had lunch with a friend who's killing it in personal injury. Maybe I'll just add a personal injury site. We just encourage you to really think that through. Because without strategy and goals and the commitment that would go behind those, it's much less likely that an additional site will succeed in a scenario like that. So let's turn our attention now and talk about how the Lawlytics system works. Now, for those of you who are already members, we're going to give a demonstration and you'll see the control panel, but it may look a little bit different because you may only have one website in your control panel. If you only have one website with us, we're going to show you what it looks like and how it works when you have a lot of different websites. So we designed Lawlytics with the idea that any lawyer who wants to have control over their entire web presence should be able to do so easily, without thought, without multiple logins, and without really having a learning curve. So what we've done is we've created a system where you can have firm-wide ownership of your account, but then you can have attorneys empowered to go in and work on their own websites if you have multiple attorneys. When you are with Lawlytics, let's say you have one site and you decide strategically that you're going to add another site. We've gone through it. It's a great idea to do so. Well, it's easy to get you up and running fast because your basic information is already there. Couple clicks and your locations are populated. Your bios are populated. Any recommendations or case results that you want to put in are also there. And you have the ability with Lawlytics to instantly deploy resources that you've added to the Lawlytics control panel throughout all of your websites. And let me show you what that means. So when you are on Lawlytics and you have multiple websites, you only have to enter firm information once, and that can be deployed everywhere. Results, you only have to enter those once. Recommendations and other praise that you've gotten, you only have to enter that once. And we push system-wide updates, so there's no need to go in and hassle with the maintenance of individual sites. You never have to worry about one site getting updated while the other doesn't, because everything in Lawlytics gets pushed out instantly. With that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break out of this presentation here, and I'm going to show you under the hood of Lawlytics. So for those of you who are members, this is going to look very familiar. And for those of you who are not, this is the Lawlytics control panel. It's really beyond the scope of this particular session to give you a detailed tour. But what I'm going to do is just show you how the resources are pushed to multiple law firm websites. Before I do that, I'm going to show you this very simple example, which is in this account. And this is in our Lawlytics sandbox. You can tell here because it's a .lawlyticsapp.com address. So this is not live on the internet as it is right now. This is just a sample version. But let's take a look here at the About Our Firm menu. And under here we have a case results area. And you've got a bunch of case results here. And now what happens when you click on these individual case results is it creates individual pages for them that your potential clients can scroll through. Office locations, you can have as many office locations as you want. Lawlytics will consolidate all of them in whatever order you want and then populate them on your site. Attorney bios, you can have as many as you want as well. And what you'll see here is this is a page that shows all of the attorneys that are indicated. and then you can drill down to their individual attorney bio pages. And then there's a recommendations engine that's also built in. And that works the same way that the case results work. So if you've gotten recommendations, you put them on there, or you can request them directly from your clients using the Lawlytics system. And Lawlytics will display them in whatever order you want, putting them all on both the index and an individual page. Now, the reason why I showed these things, and also there's office locations at the bottom as well, is that these are things that may be common throughout multiple websites. So here's how it works. So from the Lawlytics dashboard, under the Publish menu, first of all, I'm going to show you the Sites menu. And in the sites menu here, this is a ridiculous number of sites because this is our sample account. But if you're a Lawlytics member right now, you probably have 1, maybe 2 sites in there. If you had 10, for example, the first 2 rows would be filled up. And when you go down and you drill down to the individual sites, you'll be able to click on any of these and very easily edit your site, rearrange your pages, and so forth. But there are certain things that are not specific to an individual site, and those things are what I just showed you. So let's say you want to update an office location. So you've got 4 office locations here, and you enter the address and so forth, and that will automatically put in the map and everything. And then you've got down here a list of all of your Lawlytics powered websites. If you want to display that location, you simply check the box or uncheck it to not display it. And if you want various attorneys that you have in your office or in your firm displayed with an individual office, you either check or uncheck the attorneys at this office area as needed. Let's look at recommendations. Basically the same thing. So what you'll see here, and this looks ridiculous because there's so many in here, but you'll see that Lawlytics Locator is the that's the sample site here, and that's where it's published. But let's say we also wanted to publish it on this site. All we would do is check that and press save, and then once that saves, now this recommendation is on both sites. Now, isn't that duplicate content though? It is, to a certain extent, although these are not the things that typically attract clients via the search engines anyway, so it's not really that big of a deal, even if it were a problem with Google. But Lawlytics prevents that from becoming a problem, because what Lawlytics allows you to do is designate which of your many sites with us is primary. And what it will do is, for resources that are shared across multiple sites, it will tell Google to just ignore the listing of that duplicate content on the other sites and only index it on the firm's main site. So it works the same way with attorney profiles. It works the same way with case results as well. So let's say you wanted to edit this one, and I think we have a little screen lag here. So let's say you wanted to remove this sample attorney from the Lawlytics Locator site. So I'm going to uncheck this. I'm not going to save it yet. Let's take a look at attorneys here. And there she is. So now if we've unchecked this and we go and we update the user and we refresh this, you'll see that now she's gone, and it works the same way for adding them. And the same holds true for case results. And so you can display them on as many sites as you want, juggle them around, disperse them in whatever order you want, and so forth. That's the main gist of it. The other efficiency that's built in is Lawlytics has a built-in lead management system and forms library. And so let's say you have a number of different practice areas. We can go to our forms library and you can create a new intake form, for example. And you can display this on any of your sites, or you could display the same form across multiple sites. But when you create this, Not only can you say which attorneys or other staff member in your firm you want the forms to be emailed to when they're filled out, but you can insert it literally anywhere into any of your sites that you want. And so these types of resources also can be reused. And then when people fill out a form on your website, they go through our lead management system. And so they become a lead, and then you can put them through. It's a mini intake management system that allows you to see all of your leads across all of your websites, see where they went. It will also show you in detail where they went on your website or website. So if you have multiple law firm websites and they're all consolidated under Lawlytics, you can see how your potential client moved from one website to another and what influenced them in that process. So that's it. I'm not going to go any more in depth than that on this particular tour. If you want to see more, always happy to show you. At this point, we're going to go ahead and end the presentation, at least in chief.